Well, good morning. Good Sunday morning. So, yes, as the world turns, we definitely see a lot of things going on in the news, and there's all kinds of things bubbling and changing, and as usual. And, I have to say, when I looked at the astrology, I'm going to myself, this is exactly what's being mirrored in the heavens. And, I'm a Vedic astrologer by, general principles, but what I really do like is looking at the ancient traditional astrology. And of course, that goes back to Egypt, Babylonia, the Greek and Chaldean astrology, which goes into the mists of time. And I have to say, one of the terms that's come up, in fact, Robert Hand and I were talking about this years ago. What do you do with Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto in Vedic astrology? What do you do with, again, today everyone's looking at asteroids, so many different things. And what's interesting is we came up with a term called transcendentals. Oh, what does that mean? Well, this is outside of normal mundane consciousness, influences that shape, or you could say change the direction of society. And one of the things that has just happened, and I mentioned this last podcast, was that Uranus just went retrograde. And that is very, very powerful. And the reason why is it's heading back to the star Alcyon. And Alcyon is a really powerful star. You can actually see here, it's in the Pleiades. In fact, there's ancient legends that Alcyon represents the Pleiades itself, and it's the daughter of Atlas and Pelion, and who became the mother of Hydrus and Neptune. There's all these different things. It's basically said to be one of the brightest stars in the Pleiades. Well, when Uranus conjoins this has a huge effect. And again, the last time this happened was World War II. And what are we seeing right now? We're seeing Trump is kind of changing a little bit now. He's basically coming back and saying, well, Russia's not stopping. And I don't know if anyone's heard the news, but we just had a huge attack with a lot of people killed and many injured over in Kiev. So this is actually ramping up. And when we look back at, what has been precipitating with the UN and a lot of different things politically, it's really not a stable situation right now. And this is the nature of Uranus going back over the Pleiades in retrogradation. And remember, it's going to stop and go direct. In fact, Uranus will actually go direct right around February 3rd, which is a really powerful situation. Why? Because that's also when Saturn and Neptune could join. So this is a really pivotal time in human history. Never before, at least in modern reported history, have we seen the technologies and the weaponry where it is. And, I still maintain that this is all going to work out without a mushroom cloud or World War III. But it's a very precarious time. And this whole situation with Charlie Kirk is so interesting. And if we go back and we look again, the people in modern times who have really left an impact, again, JFK, you've got MLK, RFK, Malcolm X, John Lennon, and now Charlie Kirk can be added to that list. So whether you liked him or disliked him, he made a change and he actually brought things forward. And again, I'm always amazed when on my previous podcast, when I had said the sun had moved forward right when he was assassinated to the conjunction of the eclipse points, right when that happened, right when that bullet flew. So, and I know there's all kinds of theories. Boy, I've been seeing and hearing all kinds of reports on what's going on with that. And I don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but as I had said, there's no question in my mind something happened other than what's being officially reported. Clearly, with getting into that, but I think you're looking at all roads will be blocked into really finding out the true essence of what happened. But if we just back it out and take it up to 100,000 feet and look down at this, truly, again, when people try and make a difference, they often get assassinated. And this is what's happened throughout history. And it kind of goes with the theme of Uranus retrograde now, going back over this fixed star Alcyon. It always brings a time in the world where we see dissension and rebellion against suppression. And this is exactly what's happening. And we're seeing it in many ways. Again, we're seeing the situation still not resolved in the Middle East. So a lot of powerful things going on. And look at all the crazy stuff that we hear on the news. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today, and I always like talking about this, is how do we exist in a crazy situation like this? And the world's always been crazy and it always will be crazy. So sooner or later, we got to go to our center, right? And one of the things that, I always like, and this guy, I'd mentioned, I went up to Krishnamurti Center here a few weeks back, and he has a lot of words of wisdom. You got to weed through what he says. But he basically, like most people who talk about consciousness, focus on emptying your mind from the white noise of the world and going inside, right? Getting in touch with who you are. And this world, and that's what I like about astrology, is it shows the ebbs and flows of energies. But you got to remember, it's not us. We are separate from that. The consciousness that we have, or the soul root that we're attached to, is so outside of all this lower conscious white noise. And one of the things, that I'm seeing here too, this October is going to be really pivotal. Why? Because we also have Uranus making that conjunction right about the 29th of October. We also have Pluto going direct on October 3rd. So this is a huge shift in energy. Pluto is a very interesting planet. I know a lot of people say, well, but it's not a planet, right? But actually, Pluto seems to act so powerfully in all the readings that I do, and including in my own life. I have to tell you, whether it's a planet or not, we don't care. I can tell you that point really has a powerful, powerful energy. Last week, I actually did something kind of fun. I went over to the Carol Reiter Society, and I should have put a picture up, but Carol Reiter was Ronald Reagan's astrologer. Now, they always said Nancy Reagan was the one who used Carol, but Ronald really used Carol Reiter a lot. And it was an interesting talk. I went in there and some really wonderful people. And there was a gentleman giving a talk about Pluto and all the other planets, what they call nodes, which are literally the point of joining of that planet's orbit with the sun's orbit in a heliocentric. And many of the ancient astrologers would pay attention to also the geocentric points of connection. And we're clearly at points right now that are very, very interesting, because we're going to see a lot of powerful changes in this world. And one thing about time is, time I don't think is an illusion, but I think it is an astronomical construct. Again, I always mention sunrise, noon, sunset, midnight is always our perception of reality in this time frame. If you were to be on a different planet, or for that matter, if you exit your body known as death, you will not be in that time frame anymore. And this is the thing that I think the world never touches on, is how we center ourselves. And Krishnamurti did. I'll just play a brief second here.
Mortality is not me surviving eternally till the Gabriel angel blows the horn. But there is immortality that is beyond death when time has come to an end.
See? So, and he goes on and on that talk. I could play it. It would take a long time. But essentially what he's driving at is that we are in the center. So when you feel like a Q-tip in a mud puddle, looking at all the news and all the crazy shootings and horrible stuff that goes on, wars, et cetera, where are we in the center? Well, what I like about astrology is I don't live my life by it. I like to kind of use it in concert. It's kind of like a driver going down the road in a car. If you see your conditions and you react to them, you're probably going to change the outcome that would have happened had you not seen them. You see, it's like the car that's about ready to run a stoplight or some event happens. Your awareness to that can severely alter or very positively alter an outcome. And again, you can't stop everything. But I would say that, this is a time when the world is coming unglued a bit and it brings in change. The Vedas, which are a profound, profound text, talks about this, how there's many different texts within the Vedas, and they're very deep to understand. But what I love about some of the terminology in there is that divinity always brings down into creation fail-safes or things that re-alter. Many people who are Christian have read the Sermon on the Mount. Excellent, excellent text. And it always says, if you're living in fear, you're probably going to attract more of it. So it's always good to check our minds. Our lower conscious minds are, again, like silly putty. They pick up and they literally attract what we fear or what we think about. This is why thought is such an important thing. And I love looking at the cycles in astrology because I get so many readings where people, is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? And the interrogation astrology gives guidance to that. And at the very worst, it's going to at least change your reaction to an outcome. You see, and that is the golden thing. I want to show a book here. This was put out. There's many books like this. This is called Thought Forms. And again, the book that I always mention a lot, and I mention this book frequently. This is a book I'd like to throw out of helicopters, which is the Magus of Strovolos. He spends a great deal of time talking about thought forms, which come out of the third eye chakra. And again, all this astrology that's coming at us and these changes are going to be quite colossal between now and next spring, because Uranus is going to go back over the Pleiades, not fully, but it's going to definitely cross Alcyon and go deep into the Pleiades station, turn around and come back. Well, what does this mean? Well, again, every time we see this, the world goes through dissension or change. And that's the operative word with Uranus. It's always changed. It's the two crescents of the moon bent outwards with the cross in the middle over the sun. And Uranus is one of the most unusual planets. Do you know that it actually orbits 180 degrees on its side? And no astronomer drawing breath can tell us why. It's very odd. In fact, all these planets have different angularities when they're examined. And gravity is not the cause of it. The solar system is like a standing wave, and I think it's based on mass consciousness. And there seems to be evidence that it's rearranged many times before. And that's not definitive in science, but I believe that it's true. So it's interesting to watch what's happening in the world and then see the changes that are happening through the astrology. Says we got a lot going on. We've also got some really powerful things that's going to wind up here. See, Jupiter and Saturn are coming to a trine, and that's actually going to really start coming in orb this month of October, but it's going to perfect right in the middle of November. That's very positive. So we could see things getting crazier and crazier right now, but that could turn around and bring a very positive resolution to some of the stuff that we're seeing. This war with Ukraine and Russia is very dangerous because I believe, and this is stuff I've looked at in interrogations, that there are forces going on who actually really want a war. They really want to get this going in a much, much bigger way. And I believe that we won't get into World War III, like all out, but it could increase more. And we're seeing the same thing. Look at Trump is saying right now. He's saying, well, we're going to, sell more weapons to NATO and allow NATO to go in deeper. So everything I'm seeing on the left brain side of news looks like things could get more intense. And what's good about the astrology, and it might get more intense, but as we move forward into November, we might see a resolution to this. So we'll see what happens. This is very, very powerful stuff right now. And this eclipse, you got to remember, eclipses don't just happen and go away. They have a lasting effect, sometimes up to a couple of years. And in fact, the lunar eclipse, which happened on the 7th, right before Charlie Kirk got killed, is very powerful. And the amount of time that it lasted can also mean the amount of months or years that it has an effect. And that was a pretty long eclipse. We didn't see it in the United States. It would have been down under. Southeast Asia and Australia and New Zealand would have seen it. But, because it happened when the moon was below the horizon on the Western hemisphere. So very powerful. So it doesn't matter where you see it, though oftentimes it does have an effect there. But this is a strong energy that's really going to bring out a lot of things in the open. And of course, look at what's happening politically in the United States. You're getting people indicted like Comey and Wray, and this is going to increase. We're going to see more trouble coming forward in this whole arena. It's going to get pretty nuts. And I've heard, that generals have been convening with Hegseth, et cetera, et cetera. So things are going to get dicey here for a while. And I would love to paint this love and light, on the societal side, but it doesn't look like it from the astrology. It looks like it could get a lot more intense. And there's going to be a backlash to that. Let's hope it doesn't. But, I got to call what I see in the astrology. But back to why I brought up keeping centered in our own consciousness. Again, the best analogy is you feel like a Q-tip in a mud puddle when you get around all this negative news. And that's why it's so important to center ourselves. And this is exactly what thought forms, or being aware of your thoughts. This is an interesting book. It was actually written in the I think it was written right around 1905 or 1920. I don't know the exact date on it. But there's a lot of books that came out in the 1800s, and a lot of stuff in ancient secret societies that talk about your lower conscious mind emitting the thought form elementals out of the third eye chakra. And this is something to be very aware of. I know myself, we can all get negative. We can all have stuff coming in on us. We got family stuff. You may have legal stuff. You may have financial stuff. And of course, if you look at the world, turn on the news, there's not any solace there, is there? So it's really an inside job to stay centered and stay positive. Again, when you look at creation or you look at the earth itself, absolutely amazing. It really is. It's creation. And creation will always rain down into this whole world. And I don't care if the world blew up, it would still recreate itself. And that's what Krishnamurti was talking about, is we are timeless souls having a physical experience. And that's so true. And that's so true. And that's something to keep aware of. Again, when I look at what's happening in the world right now, we're in a great state of change. And the world's always in a state of change, but it gets much more pronounced when you get these outer planets making the aspects they make. Now, Uranus and Pluto actually just made a trine, but it's separating, you see? So now it's heading towards that conjunction of Alcyon right on the 29th of October. So it's very, very powerful. So again, if you're watching the mind control news and the whole, world coming at us, it's likely to get pretty crazy. But hang in there, because it's an inside job to keep our sanity. And I think in the end, things will work out and we'll move on. I think you're going to see some very intense shifts with Europe and the United States banding together to try and put sanctions on Russia. That looks like an inevitability. One of the things I've had several clients lately tell me about, and some of these people are in really knowledgeable places like government security, national security, so on and so forth. And they can't say much because it's classified and they don't tell me much, but they ask questions about their personal lives and they're very concerned about AI. And again, AI is going to integrate into our lives. When I think about the new children being born, their reality structures are going to be so completely different than the reality structures many of us grew up in. I grew up in, a party line telephone with black and white TV, So, the world, and you go back farther to other people, there was no TV, there was radio. And of course, if you go back far enough, you didn't even have a telephone. So the world is rapidly changing in its external nature. And I think it probably has many times before. But what's so important, and all of us could really help each other by reminding each other that, hey, our reality structure is our perception of how we react. And that's so, so important. And I think today, I've been hearing so many comments about people, every person is running around. The other day, I was actually driving down into the city, and I noticed 3 or 4 people walking down a sidewalk. Every one of them was like this. Every single one of them they're walking down a street and they're like this. And I'm like, wow, our reality has changed so much. It's so important for us to keep that in check. So the positive side of Uranus going to Alcyon is also conscious awareness, or you could say a breakout of the programming that we've all had. And that is such a key thing to think of. See, that's the positive side of astrology. There's 2 sides to every coin, or better yet, if you look at energies, even the severest of energies, always have some positive learning or lesson out of it. And I think this one is a lesson to break free of past programming, the stuff that we have in our minds that we might not even know that we have. Psychiatrists, psychologists call it subconscious programming, habit patterns, or ingrained thoughts or belief systems, most importantly, that were programmed. And, I talk to so many people who are spiritual and they're not religious, right? And there's this whole shift right now of this war between religions and spirituality and consciousness and atheism, all that. And I always say, well, the best place to be is in your own space and believe what works for you. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do and, get on any pulpit on that issue. But this astrological energy has a way to break free from your own self's past. So even though the global situation is going on, this is really powerful. I've always loved Uranus. I was born with Uranus on the ascendant, and I've never fit in a square box. I just never fit in the room. That's probably why I ended up doing astrology and did many other things in my life. But that always fit for me because it was looking at life through a different perspective. Uranus, again, if you look at it in astronomy, it orbits 180 degrees on its side. It's totally almost disruptive to normal thinking patterns. And that's pretty cool. And when it goes over the Pleiades like this is what happens. Ba-boom, change grenade in the room, or you could say in the world. And look back. Last time this happened, World War II. Time before that was Civil War. Time before that was revolutionary. And if you go back, there was the Black Plague in Europe. You keep jumping back, even if Uranus wasn't discovered, it doesn't matter. These 2 energies always brought a huge change. So whenever it swept over the Pleiades, and it's never that simple either, because you've got many other planets that are interacting. This is why you can never get the same astrological configurations twice, never. Especially since our solar system is passing through all these sidereal changes, which happens about every 26,000 years. It's a little short of that, 25,900, 700, something like that. No one's sure. This is called the Great Year. And what I liked about Krishnamurti and Daskalos particularly, again, I mentioned the Magus Astrobolos, but the other book I always mention a lot is a book, it's a little harder to get right now, but it's called Esoteric Teachings, which is theology, and then there's Esoteric Practices. And these 2 books I really like because there's meditations in there where you'll light a candle and you focus at the base of the flame where it's blue, consuming matter, and going up into divine light. Now, if you just spend a few minutes every day, and he teaches you, you can do this without lighting a candle. Once you get into visualization techniques, you can be sitting in a coffee shop and take 5 seconds and light your own astral candle and push the negativity up through that. I find myself all the time, my lower conscious mind is probably my greatest enemy. It's also my greatest friend. So we're always battling on how to react. This is what life is. It's like a tightrope. If you watch someone on a tightrope, what are they always doing? They're always correcting to stay balanced, to stay. And if they don't, where do they go? Boom, down to the bottom. And if we look real carefully, life usually doesn't have a net, does it? though it often does. But interesting stuff. So yeah, people, I'm looking at comments here. A lot of people are responding, and someone says your emotional body is governed by your breath. So good that that person brought that up. If you read Esoteric Practices, he has very specific breathing techniques in that, where you just concentrate on your breath. So many breaths in, you hold, so many breaths out. In fact, there were many techniques where you'd breathe in through the left side of your nostril to cool the body, because the left is cooling and the right is heating. So yeah, I used to be around a lot of different people who knew a lot about how to adjust the body's temperature. One of the reasons I wasn't here last Wednesday is I smashed my foot in a stupid action that I did, and it really hurt my foot. I mean, I was hardly able to walk. And I have been using comfrey root on it. I have been also doing breathing techniques, and I noticed my foot swelled up, and I've been doing a lot of different techniques to get the flow going, and I've pretty much got it healed up now. So anyways, what's interesting is the whole world is really all about our reaction, and we got to look at life sometimes as a blessed experience. You know, again, I always like Sermon on the Mount. That text was amazing. For anybody who's Christian, read that. It's really an incredible text without dogma. If you get what's really in between the lines there, and also what's on the lines. And this is the same messages that we see that Krishnamurti talks about, Daskalos talks about, is you and your reaction. So astrology, I love because it shows us the phases, and it also shows us when things come and go. But the main game is controlling this mind. The Bhagavad Gita actually says your mind is like a team of horses that you constantly have to correct and bridle and hold in a place. In fact, that's one of the metaphors in the pictures of the Bhagavad Gita. One of the, here, I'll show you this here. I've shown this many times. If I can find my screen share here. Let's see here. I keep going into the wrong one here. There we go, screen share. So one of the things that's really interesting about thoughts, it's such a central thing. And I always love to show these little diagrams. If I can find them here, they're in here someplace. Yeah, this is actually Dr. Emoto. He wrote the books Messages in Water. And these, of course, are just two very simple examples. And he proved by freezing water in a petri dish that positive sacred thoughts always had sacred geometry, and negativity always came out looking like gobbledygook, including hatred, violence, and very intense acts. And it was amazing how many books he put out proving this beyond unequivocal doubt. So what he proved is that the third eye chakra is really emitting thought form elementals out into your third, or out of your third eye into your auric field, which circles around. In fact, it's interesting that person mentioned breath. They actually say in the Vedas that your breaths are actually counted, and it's an astronomical amount. I forget how many, they actually, there's a way you can count in astrology how many breaths you might possibly take from birth to death, which is, if you stop and think about that one, that's intense. But we are really spiritual beings having a physical experience. And if you notice, the crown chakra is Mars. And see, and this gets into astrology. If you look at Mars is the crown chakra, the force of life coming down. Jupiter is the third eye chakra, which is connected to the pineal gland. Look at Venus, our ability to speak. The sun, or heart chakra, right here, which is, again, try taking your heart and turning that off for 5 minutes, right? Mercury is the digestive processes. And of course, the moon is also, you could say, the some people liken Mercury to the spleen and various different things, but it's intelligence. It's the ability to think. The moon is the nurturing, and of course, the stomach is certainly one area where we process food and extract the etheric energy. And the reproductive organs are attached at the base of the spine to Saturn. So these 7 chakras are very central. By the way, 7 is such an interesting number. I talk about this a lot, where there's 7 holes in your head. There's 7 days of the week, 7 halls of heaven, right? There's actually 7 52-day periods throughout the year. So, and there's 7 major chakras. So again, this kind of relates to the transcendentals, which again are Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, which operate outside of the mundane action of the world. So very, very interesting stuff. And again, I always show these diagrams, which is the breakdown of the 5 layers of the soul. The first layer is the physical body and the conscious mind's attachment. The second layer is the spirit that's moving the body. The third layer is the karmic sheath, which is around the physical body. The fourth layer is the wisdom of the soul, or the divinity of wisdom of the soul. And the last highest one is the upper Godhead forces. So it's very interesting how these 5 layers are mentioned in so many different texts. And I have to say, there's a lot to it. And again, another way to look at that, and again, is this, if I can find it here, it's buried here under one of these diagrams here. And that is, yeah, this one right here. You can actually now see the big, thick dashed line, which shows beneath the sheath of karma, Saturn, the cross over the crescent of the moon, previously concretized energies that actually bind us to these incarnations. You know, because I talk to so many people, and myself is included. We see so many things that people do. And again, we hear about the news, we hear about the atrocities of the world, and on and on. But if we stay focused on who we are and how our reactions are to that, again, in the world, but not of it. And, you know, you got to be of it. We got to pay our bills. We got to react. We got to deal with all the stuff. We're all dragging up the hill without wheels, right? It's like a box dragging up a hill without wheels. But if we keep focused and keep on keeping on, that's the key. The spirit of, you can always adapt. You can always adjust. It's not over until we exit this body. And then you're still not over. You keep going on. And I had mentioned karma. And this is the mysteries of Vedic astrology. Vedic astrology is really not astrology. It's more a study of the soul's journey and how astrology interacts with it in time. And that's the real operative word there, time. And what's so interesting about Vedic astrology is if you become self-aware, the astrology still has an effect on the physical plane, but it's not as effective, because you realize you're the experiencer, not the experience. So experiencer is a lot different than the experience itself, even though it seems like we're in the experience, and we are in a physical sense. So very interesting stuff. And, you know, again, as the world turns, if you will, or for you flat earthers, as the world cycles, right? It is clearly an experience that we're all going to go through. And then, you know, when you see someone like Charlie Kirk or JFK, MLK, all these people that really made an impact on society, made a difference, whether you agree with them or not, right? They make you stop and pause. I mean, if you have a pet that dies, if you have a loved one that dies, time stops. That's when we realize, whoa, wait a minute, you know, that being is not here anymore. And it really changes us. We actually grow at that point because we stop the normal thought form processes, which is our daily thoughting patterns and response patterns, and change. We start recollecting, remembering the good times that they represented. You know, every time I see a picture of someone who's gone, I always go, wow, you know, that's such a touching thing, you know, because all the memories come flooding back in. Well, if you ever get esoteric practices, you'll find there's a lot of great meditations in this. And I really like that book a lot. And again, that was put out by the Magus of Strovolos, called, Dr. Stylianos Sateshlis was his real name. That's what they called him. And these 2 books were a companion volume, Esoteric Teachings, Esoteric Practices. And I go back to those a lot because sometimes you have to. When you look around this world, if you're looking to extract happiness from the news, from the talk shows, and from all the stuff that we get hit with, and the bills and everything else, you're probably going to get disappointed, right? So it's really a way of finding our inner sense of self. And what I love about the astrology, it was amazing. I hurt my foot exactly when transiting Mars was hitting over my sun in a quincunx to another planet. It was pretty wild. So I'm like, how can I not see that? But you see, maybe I needed to see that. So I became more aware of how I fly around all the time. So it's interesting stuff. So yeah, as the world turns, right? So anyways, a lot of great responses here. And I appreciate what a lot of people are saying here. So I'm just kind of trying to read some of these. Yeah, people are mentioning here the four humors. And again, they're talking about the body plasma and the energy that makes it possible. You know, a lot of people laughed at the earth, air, fire, and water and spirit, which are the five elements of creation, or ether, right? And, you know, if you take a physics table and you break it down, everything can be broken down into liquids, some type of kinetic energy, gases, and solids. And what does that represent? You know, Archangel Michael is fire, Archangel Gabriel is water, liquids, Archangel Raphael is air and gases, and Archangel Uriel is the physical world. And those were known also, very interesting, as the nature spirits. So this planet, they say even the minerals have a soul to them. The plants have a soul, the animals, obviously, and the humans and other beings. So this is a place, again, where spirit becomes manifest. And the astrology is the modulation upon that. And again, you know, when I'm, wanted to do this October forecast, I see a lot of powerful energies lining up this month. Particularly, again, we're going to see a Sun Mars conjunction. That's going to happen in November, but this is all in orbs. See, nothing just happens at once. It's kind of like light and sound. If you've ever gotten out of your car and the band's playing inside or at the concert hall, you hear them already. And the closer you get to them, the more powerful they get. This is why astrology is so complex. You have to look at many different energies that are in influence. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Not one aspect ever happens alone. There's always a multitude of energies, and each one of us are going to find how that energy going on in the mundane world, if you will, or the world, will interact with each one of us different. And again, I see right now people who have Saturn, Neptune influences are probably going to feel it a heck of a lot more than someone who doesn't. Why? Because Saturn and Neptune are close together and they're going to rejoin right here in February. And anyone who has a Uranus aspect right now with this combination to Alcyon might find their life is much, much more dynamic. So this is powerful stuff. And it's a time to really, I think, even focus more on being centered. You know, I hear so much about AI, and there's a lot of fear that AI is going to replace governments, and the people in the positions of governments will literally be responding to AI. So now you're dealing with a machine actually regulating things, which is okay, except down the line, if you get despotic figures, you could see something much more totalitarian than we've ever seen before. And let's hope that doesn't happen. And again, I go back to this country, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and all of the other things that were put in place with this Constitution. And I tell you, that's going to become much more germane than ever before as we see these control mechanisms of AI come into play. But even with all of that, you know, I go back and it's fun. Most of them are dead now, but when I used to talk to people who had survived the World War I, World War II, or the Depression, and I mean, those are severe. And I've talked to people who've come out of Russia and, you know, Romania and different places that have had revolutions, actually saw people in tanks, getting in, killed in the streets. And look what's going on right now in different places of the world. I mean, we as Americans don't have any idea what real war would be like. We do not want to see that. But these people survived that. And when I talked to them, it was amazing how strong they were. It actually, not that it's good that it happened, but they actually became, I think, more centered inside. There was this inner strength. And I think we all transform from adversities, no matter what they are. And that always brings growth. It tempers the metal, or what do they say, builds character, right? Not that we want that, but it happens. And we're a lot tougher than we think, especially when we get out of fear mode and get into focus mode. And some of these texts that I'm mentioning, they're not the be all end all, but they can put you on a path that can really help. Because I think this is a time, and particularly in October here with the astrology, where we're going to see a lot of massive disruption and change, and a lot of polarization too. See, this is what happens. Uranus is like that. Uranus is like throwing a change grenade into the room. And what happens is people polarize and they become very dug in on that, especially hitting that fixed star Alcyon. Alcyon was considered to be, by some of the ancients, the central star which the solar system went around. Now, that's been disputed by astronomers, but there's something very significant about it. It's the brightest star in the Pleiades, and I think it has a huge effect coming up here. And again, we are in the first quarter of the moon. You know, the full moon's going to come up here like it does every month, and we'll be talking about that next week. But what I like here is, I think this is a time where if we get a hold of the one thing we can control, and that is our reactions to things, with all this powerful energy coming in, it's actually a time of growth, of great growth. So, yeah, a lot of people are mentioning Hippocrates, and yeah, there's really some good comments here. I wish I could focus more on that when I get talking. It's hard to do that. Yeah, their hate won't defeat us. A lot of people are saying a lot of great things. So, yeah. So, yeah, people are sitting here talking about all different types of things here, which is good, relatable to what I'm talking about. And yeah, I would say clearly, it's hard for me to get to everybody's thing here. Someone's asking me, do I believe cryptocurrency will have a near future effect on this economy? I think that's definitely going to happen. I think they're tying it to cryptocurrency. I've heard XRP is actually an exchange, or one of them, that's going to be tied. I think there are things happening right now that are very profound. I'm hearing things going on in Europe, and you can see what's going on with the UN, and the Supreme Court of this country is going to have a huge effect. I could tell you this tariff thing. Now, this will create a lot of hate mail, but I personally think the tariffs might be the pathway out of the bondage this country's been into since 1913. That's just what I've heard from people who are very knowledgeable, even though a lot of people are saying, oh, the tariffs are increasing costs. Well, you know, again, Woodrow Wilson was the guy who rubber stamped the Federal Reserve Act. The bankers took control, and they own this place. And it's not just them. And I mentioned that, you know, the Tower of Babel and the Great Taking. In fact, I was reading something, a lot of people know this, your birth certificate became a requirement after 1913. And that means you and I are mortgaged to all this money that's being borrowed in these countries, and not just in this country, in a lot of countries. And what's interesting about that is it all comes down to money and collateral. And, you know, when you look at the world, it can be very disappointing and dark and heavy, because it's all about control, power, and money. And the more advanced we get, the more these complex systems are going to serpentine around us, and that noose around our neck gets a little bit tighter, right? So, you know, again, this goes back to consciousness and our reaction to it. And again, you know, I harken back to my grandmother telling me, Jeff, she goes, it was crazy. She goes, people were jumping out of windows in 1929. People were losing their homes. They were on the streets. They couldn't eat. They were in bread lines. They were in soup lines. She said the only reason our family survived was because my grandfather was a postmaster at the post office working for the federal government. So a lot of people didn't have that opportunity. They were losing stuff left and right. Now, what's nice is the fiat currency has at least kept it rolling. We're in debt up to here. And what's interesting is the Supreme Court is going to make a ruling fairly soon, whether or not this judge who ruled the tariffs are unconstitutional and the president can't do that. Because if that's the case, we're going to be really back in to the control of the bankers. If we don't bail and shovel ourselves out of this financial position, it'll be a big deal. And I think the Supreme Court will go that way. Not to get into politics and all that, but that's another thing that I'm seeing here. Again, the Jupiter trining Saturn, and also this Uranus making the Passover over Halcyon breaks things up, breaks up the past. And this is what I think is going to be happening here in this month of October, which is very pivotal, very pivotal. Many people are worried about stock market crashes and total, crashes in real estate markets. It's going to be disruptive. I don't see that that's going to happen. I do think we're in a retraction period. There's a lot of different financial opinions out there. A lot of people doing stuff on crypto, etc. I kind of got away from working with traders because it was so time consuming. And I did that a lot in the past. We would look at stock trade charts. We would look at interrogations and first trade charts on the SEC. Very interesting how you can use astrology for that. And I do that if someone requests. But for the most part, I just go by interrogations, and it better look fabulous if you're going to invest into it, right? So, and oftentimes it doesn't. But I do think we're going to get through this. And I think we're in, just like Uranus shows going over Halcyon, a transitional change. And change sometimes can be good. It's disruptive, but it can be good. So I think that's where we're at. And I think this month of October shows that's really going to be happening. And again, right on the 29th of this month, Uranus gives a kiss or an alignment, which is called a conjunction, to Halcyon. Exceedingly powerful. It's interesting. The ancients always said that Halcyon was the nature of the moon, which is emotions, and Mars, which is war and intensity, and you could say force. So this is not an easy conjunction. It's very forceful. But again, we just like any other experience, we react with less reaction and more common sense. We'll get through it. And it actually might end up to be quite positive. And again, the reality structures in this world always change when Neptune and Saturn come together. And that's all going to happen in February. So very, very powerful stuff. And weather is likely to be crazy. So we'll see where it's at. And weather is always crazy. But again, we're in hurricane season, and it's not as bad as it has been sometimes. A lot of people have been asking me about earthquakes. Is California going to crack off and fall in the ocean, or some other place? I think we're going to see more seismic activity and weather-related stuff as we start moving towards February. I really do. I keep getting right now here in California, we're okay. And believe me, I'd head for the hills, or some hill anyhow, if it looked really bad from what I can see. So yeah, a lot of people are saying here, everything's interconnected, spirit is all in things. And it's very fascinating. Many of the ancient texts said that if there's even certain people who consciously keep connected to creation, God, spirit, whatever you want to say, it actually changes the severity or outcome of certain situations. Even though everything might seem like it's going to hell in a handbasket around you, it's those who can stay centered and realize you're just a spiritual being having a physical experience. So with that, I've got to run, but I certainly appreciate everybody joining me, and a lot of great comments here. And I wish I could spend more time commenting and responding to all of your individual comments, because there's a lot of great stuff here. It's just my problem is, again, as usual, I got to go. So thanks so much for joining me. And hopefully next Wednesday, I should be back online here and everything is good. I'm healing up a lot better, which is good, because boy, that was a rough one. So I didn't break anything, thank God, but man, it was tough. So everyone have a great weekend. Stay centered and stay focused and stay positive. Thank you for watching.